Hello.
Hello, hello.
It's probably better. Your note taker was trying to get in the Zoom call too.
Yeah, no worries. You can kick it out. It just does that automatically.
I figured. Okay. Today I'm from my mobile phone, from my mobile internet. For some reasons, exactly today, my cable internet stopped working, of course.
Yeah, it always
And
happens when you need it.
yeah, so I hope it will be fine, but we will see. Maybe if my connection becomes too unstable, we might have to redo it later.
Yep.
But do you hear me, see me well?
Yeah, I hear you, no problem at all.
Well, I'm in Germany, and in Germany, mobile internet is interesting. You're from Poland, right?
Yeah, I'm in Warsaw right now.
So in Poland, the moment you cross the German-Polish border, internet becomes really good.
Yes, yes, I know. It's interesting. I think it's because it's newer here, you know? And that's why,
Because of what?
I think it's because of historical reasons. Like, Germany wasn't as destroyed during the war, so you have a lot of old infrastructure that's still kind of there and useful, and we had to build everything from scratch. So I think it's just the matter of having, like, you know, newer cables and stuff like that.
Okay. So I open the stream also from my phone, but now I'm not sure if it's a good idea because like it will actually consume the bandwidth. We'll see. To do a couple of more things before we start.
Okay.
Do you hear me well?
Yes, there was a freeze moment. Like, right, sometimes your video is glitchy, but I can hear you fine. I don't think there's any delay.
Okay, it's probably not a good idea to also open stream from my mobile phone. Okay, yeah, just a second.
Where are you in Germany?
Berlin.
Nice. I come from a city called Wrocław that used to be Germany. That's pretty close to Berlin. I really like
It's a very nice city.
Yeah, it's really nice.
There are a lot of gnomes, right, around the city?
Gnomes?
Dwarfs. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wrocław, yeah. Yeah, it's like a signature thing, I think.
Yeah, so I remember I was there, I think like 11 years ago, or 10.
Nice.
Yeah, we were going around the city and taking pictures of those dwarfs.
Yeah, that's cute. I tend to drop by Berlin quite often, like every year, every other year. It's a really nice city to be in, to party as well. It's really good for clubbing.
I've been in Berlin for so long and I never.
You've never partied in Berlin? Oh my God.
Not in a club.
You're missing out.
I guess so, yeah. Okay, but next time you come to Berlin, we usually do data breakfasts or data lunches or data dinners in Data Talks Club. So next time you come, you can let me know and we might organize, or I can let you know if there's anything in case you want to socialize also here. Like,
That's
not
awesome.
just go party, but talk to. Okay, I think we should start. I hope my internet connection is not super terrible. So what I will do right now is I will just do a quick intro. So I'll share my screen, do a quick intro, and then we'll start with the interview. Hey everyone, welcome to our event. This event is brought to you by Data Talks Club, which is a community of people who love data. We have weekly events, and today is one of such events. If you want to find out more about the events we have, there is a link in the description. Go there, click on this link, and you'll see all the events we have in our schedule. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This way you will not miss any future streams like the one today. And we have an amazing Slack community where you can hang out with other data enthusiasts. So join it too. During today's interview, you can ask any question you want. There is a pinned link in the live chat. Although there are some problems with my internet, so I don't know if this time I was able to post the link, but I will be monitoring live chat too, so in case the link does not appear. And yeah, so I will be covering these questions I will be asking these questions during the interview. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will open the document we prepared for you. And if you're ready to start, we can start.
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay. This week we'll talk about GPT and LLMs and building NLP products. And interestingly, in the last year, we did not have any talk about LLMs or GPT, but today is our second one in a row. So the previous podcast interview was also about LLMs. So this is purely coincidental. We did not plan that to have two interviews about LLMs, but this is how it happened. We'll try to cover something new that we did not cover previously. And we have a special guest today, Sandra. Sandra is not new to Data Talks Club. You might have seen her answering questions in our Book of the Week event with her book about GPT-3, building innovative NLP products using large language models. So Sandra is an AI entrepreneur, evangelist, community builder, and she has done a lot of amazing things. She will probably tell us more about that today. So welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Alexei. Super excited to be here. Yeah, let's do this. I'm not surprised that it's a second interview about LLMs because they're everywhere right now. So
yeah, I mean, we are kind of late to the party because like everyone was talking about LLMs half a year ago, and we were, I don't know how it happened, but we were a bit late. But now we have two events in a row. So anyways, better late than never. The questions for today's interview are prepared by Johanna Bayer. Thanks, Johanna, as always, for your help. And yeah, let's start with the interview. So before we go into our main topic of LLMs and GPT, let's start with your background. Can you tell us about your career journey so far?
Yes. So in terms of when I joined the space, it was 5 years ago. And I was always interested in artificial intelligence adoption. So what will people do with AI tools once they are out there? How it will impact their everyday life, how it will impact business, etc. I started by actually starting my own project, an AI accelerator for startups called NextGrid, together with my co-founder, Matthias. And then with NextGrid, we were aiming to support startups at the earliest stage, so POC or pre-POC stage, that want to be more business savvy and want to gain further financing and validate their concept further. Next to NextGrid, we also co-founded an AI hackathon event platform. It used to be called Deep Learning Labs, but it got rebranded to Lab AI. So if you want, you can check it out. Yes, Lab AI. So if you're looking for participating in AI hackathons that use the latest tech, that's the one for you. And so through that, we basically tried to get closer to artificial intelligence ourselves, but also let others play with the latest tech out there. It was around 2018. So the access to models started getting easier and easier. And so we were able to, like spin off an environment and plug into OpenAI Gym and train a reinforcement learning lunar ladder or something like this. So make a hackathon out of it. So we started doing these hackathons, and at some stage, I stumbled upon text generation models. So at that time, GPT-2 was out and GPT-3 was about to be out. And I really wanted access to it. So I have a friend called Max that I say hi to. He has a YouTube channel and he started making YouTube videos about GPT-3 and also how he got access to GPT-3, how he got into the beta list. And he got it by making a video about it. So I figured that I might do the same because I really wanted to play with it. So basically that's how my YouTube channel started. And it actually worked. Like I did 2 videos about different types of GPT-3 demos I've seen out there at our hackathons, but also beyond. And I got access to it. So I started fooling around with it basically. And the channel got traction. I wasn't expecting such a traction so quickly, but there seemed to be already back then, it feels like ancient history because that was like 3 years ago, interest in exploring this subject. It was quite a small community at the time, but once you talked about it, you were pretty recognizable. So I did all sorts of things, talked to the founders that were building with GPT-3, tested new tools that were coming out to the market, like playing AI Dungeon and stuff like that. It was really fun, generating Christmas present ideas, things like that. So then I got approached by my future book author Shabam Sabo, and he offered to write a report together about GPT-3, but then the publisher we were working with offered that we write a book about it. And for me, it was a great opportunity to kind of get out of my imposter syndrome and start diving deeper into the field. So the book was kind of like talking about the business side of things, but also the tech side of things. And once I went down the rabbit hole, I just felt like this is really my domain and I don't want to get out of it. So I stayed. And now I am working for Cohere, which is developing state-of-the-art LLMs. And I am building community there, and I am focusing on education about large language models, which brings me here today as well.
That's a quite fascinating story, like how you made a video to just get access to GPT-3. I'm wondering if today I still don't have access to GPT-4, and I think because I never used my API, I didn't put any money there. I only, even though I'm paying for ChatGPT, I never used the OpenAI API with money. So I still do not have access to GPT-4. I'm wondering now if I make a video about GPT-4, it will not help because the community is so large.
Yeah, it exploded. Like the scale of things is just mind-blowing. There are so many videos right now about this. Like, but back then, 3 years ago, it was a handful of people just exploring it. It was very new, and now it's exploded, and now the market adoption and interest is huge. So we are in a very interesting time when it comes to LLMs.
How did you actually make a video without having access to GPT-3?
I was just talking about different types of use cases I see in the future, and also different types of like play projects, toy projects that people were having at the time that I found pretty fascinating, and that seemed to be enough to get me in. So if you're looking for a hack for the future, yes, try any angle you can to get somewhere, no matter whether you know about it or not, whether you have access or not. Yeah, you can do that.
Or maybe with GPT is kind of late because like the community is now very large. But for the next big thing, could be a good solution, right?
Yep.
Yeah, quite interesting. So your book is about business and tech side of GPT and LLMs, right? So what are business cases for using GPT?
Yeah, so That's a huge question, actually. Right now, especially at the time when we were writing the book, that was 2 years ago, we were talking to folks across different verticals, like entertainment industry, like creative studios, or sales assistants, or code generators, or chatbot providers, and they were all using GPT models, text generation models in their particular context. And already at the time, you could see both startups and more mature companies playing with it and trying to adopt it slowly. But since then, so much happens on the market that really I don't see how text generation models are not relevant to a particular industry. You can basically use them for any type of industry. I like to say that with LLMs, we're kind of in this next technology wave. Like in the past, we were with a web browser, or even before with a personal computer. So we got this completely new type of tool to interact with our machines using human language. And through that, I can envision that we are just at the beginning of it, even though it's already 5 years since transformer architecture, which is the foundational architecture for LLMs, was founded. But this is very early days of the very long, future business adoption and all sorts of projects built on top of it. It's also worth mentioning that GPT type of architecture, right now it's trademarked by OpenAI, but you can have similar generative pre-trained models that don't have a GPT in the name, but have very similar capabilities. So overall, we just call them text generation models. So, things like Claude or Cohere's Command, or open source models that generate text that are not coming from OpenAI. So these are like text generation models. And next to them, there's also another group of language models called text understanding models that, well, they're not called, they are text understanding models. They help machines to understand text better, but they're called embedding models. So with these two, you have all sorts of business use cases right now. And you can also merge the two, like combine the two to power like even more creative use case. Right now, roughly speaking, for text generation, you have very popular use cases like any type of text manipulation. So it can be a copy creation, it can be support chat assistant, personalized chatbot, AI friend, AI therapist, any kind of like use case where you converse with the model is very popular right now. And also with which you manipulate text. When it comes to the text understanding, very popular use case is memory for these chatbot type of systems, where for the model to be able to converse with you in a personalized way, remembering all the intricate details of your conversation, all the context that you have given it so far, it has to translate all this into its own sort of, way. It translates it to numbers, and then it retrieves it from there, and then keeps talking to you. But basically, this is what you use embeddings for a lot these days. And also you can use them for semantic search, which is, roughly speaking, a new type of search engine, where instead of keyword matching, you use semantic similarity between different words and sentences to look for, to retrieve information based off any query. And this is a more accurate way to retrieve information that has a better chance of hitting precisely the user intent behind it. Because oftentimes when we do keyword search, we don't necessarily find what we look for. I mean, Google search is a very common experience like this, like you're typing in something and then you need to scan through all these results, and maybe on the first page you'll most of the time you'll find something, but a lot of this information is just not really relevant. With semantic search, it helps you to hit that sweet spot faster and more accurately.
And are you still, so you mentioned that you had a company, NextGrid, where you supported startups, POC stage. Are you still doing any of that, or are you fully focused on Cohere right now?
I'm fully focused on Cohere, but I am kind of I exited the company, but I'm within the orbit, let's say.
Mm-hmm. The reason I'm asking about that, because I'm pretty interested in NextGrid or maybe other incubators. How more use cases of GPT or LLMs do you see right now? It's 50%, 30%, or do you have any number? Or most of them are LLM based POCs now.
I mean, most of them, at the beginning when we were founding NextGrid, there were no startups that were trying out to adopt the text generation or text understanding models, LLMs. But right now, I mean, it's also because right now it's kind of the most popular thing there is. From the VC side of things, folks are really interested in the big phrases like generative AI and large language models. So startups have a huge incentive to somehow figure out a way to use them in their own company if they want further financial support. So that's kind of how it works right now, as far as I know. But it's a great time. It's it's a wonderful time to go out there and explore different problems where you can apply LLMs and you can solve actual things. My opinion is that, I think it's a popular one, that first and foremost, you need your tool to be useful for it to be adopted by others and for others to start using it on a daily basis and, just stop envisioning life without it in the future. And it takes a lot of insights into how people are doing things and what bothers them to be able to find it, and then to kind of use LLMs to solve it further. So copywriting is a great example. We have all sorts of social media right now, social media platforms, and it's overwhelming to be able to sustain presence on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, what have you. Probably missed something, Twitch, Discord. There are all sorts of places where you can be at right now. Threads, oh yeah, recently Threads, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So the reason these copy generation platforms are so popular right now is because we just want to automate a lot of the writing for social media. We don't like that. It can be repetitive, but it's important to communicate with the world these days. So yeah, this is where LLMs can help a lot. That's just one example.
With this example, it's actually a pretty interesting example. So it's good that you brought this up, because to me, it feels like right now, if we rely on LLMs for generating content on social media, doesn't it become less authentic when now, instead of just writing a copy ourselves, we rely on an AI model to do that, and then we just flood all these social media platforms with generated content. So it not only becomes less authentic, it kind of becomes repetitive, and sometimes you just can recognize that, okay, this is clearly not written by a human, because it's sometimes you just start seeing these generated posts, right? So what do you think about like this? Is it actually a good idea to replace copywriters with LLMs? Or maybe we should, instead of replacing, somehow help them?
So yeah, I totally get the example of like being able to tell whether something was generated by the model or not. I can see that myself on my social media feed lately, where sometimes I'm very confident to be able to tell that, okay, this was probably done using ChatGPT or something similar. So in my opinion, this is the way it works is LLMs are an amplifier, a tool that amplifies already existing process and executes already existing intent behind this process. So if a given person doesn't particularly care about being authentic, but rather get to a certain place, number of followers, number of sales, etc., they will not prioritize being authentic. They will prioritize getting the message across, doing it as fast and as widely as possible. And so you had a lot of inauthentic messages even before LLMs, right? Like you had people just doing it for the sake of not connecting with others, but rather maybe selling it. And now they just have a way easier time doing that. So maybe you just like see more of it, but the sort of, the initial process, it was already there. The initial intent behind it was already there.
Yeah, I understand. So it's what you're saying. It's actually good for some purposes, and we already had this sort of generated content, except maybe before it was generated by humans, it was worse quality and it was more expensive. Right now, we can rely on LLMs, on GPT to generate this content and get maybe more exposure for our content, right? For our brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful, especially when you're small, or when you're at a certain scale and like you just want to grow bigger and bigger, which is usually what businesses want. So you just have like, you can do it faster. You can have a better quality of the output. I still think that there is a lot of curation of the content generated by text generation models to be done before you press publish. If you don't do that, then you risk being discovered by attentive readers. But yeah, I think if you want to have a consistent brand and consistent communication, you need to curate these things, and you need to be the final decision maker when it comes to the shape of things.
So instead of fully automating and just letting GPT go wild and generate all the social media posts, we still need to have a human in the loop, maybe a copywriter that edits these things before they go live, before we publish them, right?
Definitely. I mean, it's not uncommon to see models hallucinate and just make up facts that are not accurate, that are not there in reality, or twist certain things, or mix up a communication style, or like there's so many things that they can have a bump with that. I think it totally makes sense to have a human in the loop and always make sure that there's somebody very attentive, like really invested in making sure that this content, whatever it is coming out as coherent, consistent, good for the brand or consistent with the brand. Otherwise, you risk some random stuff here and there. My favorite example is when you type in as an AI model into Amazon search, you get a lot of product descriptions, a lot of products where people are just like copy pasting from a copy generation tool. And this as an AI model is a common phrase, but they didn't edit it, they didn't delete it, they just like pasted it there, published it on Amazon, and then now we have a lot of descriptions, including this phrase. So that's pretty hilarious. Yeah.
It usually says that as an AI model, I cannot be sure that this thing actually, like sometimes it says this thing. As an AI model, I cannot know the future, right?
Yeah, it tries to be a bit reserved when it comes to what it can and cannot do. That's usually having users in mind, because people are asking models about all sorts of things, and they personify the models very easily. They assign them a certain authority that the models don't have. So it's just a precaution to make sure that you don't take medical advice without consulting somebody from an AI model, or legal advice, or there are all sorts of things that the model is not qualified for, but it's being asked about. So it tries to be helpful, but within certain constraints as an AI model.
Yeah, I remember I wanted to talk to somebody about a contract I wanted to sign. And of course I thought, let me ask ChatGPT. So I copied the contract, put it there and asked, hey, like, is there anything suspicious about this contract? And then it said, it looks like a typical contract, but as an AI model, I cannot give you legal advice. So if you really want to be sure, like talk to a lawyer, something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another thing is just copy pasting your information and giving it to a tool that's
safe.
Yes, yeah. It's in terms of your personal data safety. It's also probably not the best idea. So we need to be a bit cautious with that stuff, and the companies that are training and giving access to large language models, they understand that very well. They understand that users tend to assign more authority or personality to the model than it actually has, and just try to, make sure that there are some guardrails. Of course, they won't always work, but and they are very annoying at times when you are looking for help and you cannot get it because the models just keep saying, "I'm sorry, I don't know. I cannot say it. I'm just a simple AI."
It is very annoying.
Yeah, I know, but then I think the user experience there will get better with more specialized text generation models towards specific use cases. So, for example, in case you're in the example of your contract, you will be able to access to have a conversation with a chatbot that has the same capabilities but is trained on a specific law. Maybe I don't know which country this contract was written in, but it could be the German law, or like could be Polish law here where I am. And also secure enough so that you can have it on your machine without it going outside and using your data further. And being able to interact with chatbot that is as close to legal assistant as possible. And I think this is where we're heading, kind of, when it comes to both, maybe not when it comes to personal productivity, because ChatGPT is still great for it, but when it comes to more professional productivity, and trying to use it for any sort of like business tasks.
Yeah, I imagine it can be useful even for lawyers, right? So safe, because like they cannot remember all the laws. So in Germany, in Berlin, it's pretty common to, like, for example, if I don't need a book, instead of throwing it away, I just put it on the street saying, for taking, right? So, and like it's a present, anyone can take it. And recently I saw a box full of law books, and they are huge, like they are super thick, like they're like gigantic books. And there were many of them, like a pile of these books. And I was wondering like, oh my God, it's good that I'm not a lawyer. I don't need to remember all these things. And I imagine for lawyers it's pretty difficult because they need to go through these books. They need to know what the things are there um, to be able to help their clients, right? And probably they will also benefit from such a model, right? Because like it can just consume the book, like digest the book, and then you can just ask questions. So like here is the case, and working on like, is there anything like which book should I consult about this case, right? And you can say, okay, it appears that this book, like page, I don't know, 10,059 talks about that, right?
Yeah, and then it's not only books, but the law keeps changing, right? There are like new laws being added on top of it. Some become extinct, so you need to keep up. And also you have cases that are far from obvious. So it's far from just like searching for the information in the book and then being able to get a perfect answer for it. As a lawyer, I think having a helpful assistant in the form of a language model that you can just ask about certain fragment of a contract or certain fragment of a given law quoted, and then also help you reason through the situation, help you reason through the defense arguments or something like this. I think it's going to be super useful, not for lawyers, for other professions as well. It's useful for me already when like you don't only use models for getting access to a certain information or generating some sort of information that you want to use further, but also for as a sparring partner, basically as a thought process aid, where you just want to get the ball rolling, start thinking about it, and then kind of help to think through it. Because dialogue is a very powerful way to think through things, and being able to have your own personalized dialogue assistant plugged into any type of data that you need. I mean, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah. So let's say I want to build an app using GPT or some LLM. How do I go about that? So I have some idea. I think we're at the beginning of this interview. We talked about that we need to talk to users to understand their problems and figure out like how exactly we can help. So let's say we did this. So we found a problem that many users seem to struggle with, and now we want to create a POC around this problem, and we want to use an LLM for that. So how do we go about that?
So to get to the next stage, I would try to think about the model capabilities that you have access to, and then the types of tasks that are needed in order to create this solution that solves this problem, right? So there are like certain steps to solve a particular problem. Is any of the capabilities of the model good for this type of task, for this type of step? You need to try it out. You need to think through it. On the more pragmatic side of things, you also need to make a major decision about choosing your foundational model, and with that, its reasoning capabilities, basically. So you can have models that are huge in size, huge in parameters as well, extremely capable, very refined when it comes to their reasoning, but maybe slower, or maybe not within the domain that you want them to be, because they were trained on a specific data that your use case is not really useful for. You also need to choose between model that is an open source model and also a model that is a proprietary model, and here your app flow will look completely different based off of this decision. So if you choose an open source model, you will need to train it yourself. You will need to do the entire maintenance when it comes to keeping the model alive on your own premises. making sure it's up to date, making sure nothing breaks, etc. When it comes to proprietary models, it can be as easy as an API call to get the model capabilities, but then you need to think about things like, what is happening to my IP when I use a proprietary model? Where does
You mean intellectual property, right?
Yes, exactly. Where does my data go to? What is happening to it, and how much can I trust this model? These are very important questions to ask yourself when you're choosing a proprietary model. And then there's also a bunch of compromises you need to make. I already mentioned that you can have a big model that's like the latest, the greatest, so the GPT-4 and any other future, champion. But it can be maybe too expensive to call it all the time. And maybe it doesn't adapt for your business to use GPT-4. It's also pretty slow at the moment. So maybe that will annoy the heck out of your users, and you need to address that. So perhaps for your use case, it's better to go for a model that is smaller in size, that will do the task just as well, but faster, cheaper. Yeah, it all depends. It all depends what kind of task it is, and you basically need to try it. It's painful, but you need to go and try different types of models, compare the outputs, compare the outcomes. Then you also want to optimize your prompts when you talk to the generation models. So that's another ball game when it comes to it's an art and science. There are people called prompt whisperers, AI whisperers, that are able to communicate with models very
Prompt
effectively.
whispers.
Yes.
Okay. I've heard prompt engineers, but prompt whispers, that's
So
something new.
Prompt engineer is this new profession that's already out there. And it's basically developers that are really skilled at creating prompts and comparing prompts and making them useful in production for businesses. Prompt whisperers are folks that are in the top of the game, like the ones that really can get the most out of the model using the smartest, the most efficient prompt, because it makes a lot of difference how you structure your question, task description, what kind of flow it's going to have, whether the model can really quickly tune into what you're trying to do and follow, or it's going to get confused. Yeah, like there's so many things here that you can optimize for. And then once you make a decision about your foundational model, that's one of the crucial things. I think it's then relatively easy to hook it up to any system, any setup that you may have. So yeah, it may be because I'm in the LLM industry that I care so much about the LLM side of things. Perhaps there's a myriad of challenges that you later on need to encounter to be able to build this app. But from what I've seen, it can be pretty straightforward from there.
Mm-hmm. So the main thing we need to decide is whether we want to host a model ourselves, train our model ourselves, and do all this maintenance work, or we rely on external party, we just make an API call. But for this case, we need to be mindful of what happens with our data. Like in my case, when I copy pasted the text of a contract, who knows what happens with this text, right? So maybe OpenAI uses this for training data, and next time somebody makes a prompt, it will just spit out my data, right? So I need to be mindful about that. And in case I build an app, I need to be especially mindful, because the data of users might be used by an external party, and we don't want that. So we need to think about these things. And then we need to select the right size of the model, right? Should it be very powerful but slow, or should it be small but maybe optimized for a specific use case, right? So
Good
these are
enough
the
for your
things
use
we need.
case.
Yeah. So these are the things we need to think about. And then after that, we invest time in writing good prompts, right? That's mostly it.
That's mostly it. Then there's also fine tuning. So models are trained on large amounts of data coming primarily from the internet, but then you have some sort of use case that requires specific lingo. You are building a chatbot assistant for finance application, and there's all sorts of financial language that this model needs to understand to be able to successfully execute tasks. And it doesn't yet because it wasn't part of its training data. Then the fun thing is that it can quickly catch up to that. It's kind of like when you go through a general education and your reasoning skills are refined enough to be able to get into any domain and master, the specialized lingo and also concepts within that domain, and being able to really swiftly, operate there. So this is the same as fine-tuning a model. You want it to go into a specific domain, you give it a certain amount of data that will be applicable to your use case, and you fine-tune it, make it better on the granular side of things when it comes to like a specific language, specific concepts, etc. And models here differ. There are models where you can do that very easily. There are models where it's not as obvious. There are models that you cannot fine-tune. So it's also the choice of the foundational model will also impact the future ability to fine-tune it, and you need to take that into account.
And I recently had a discussion about writing good prompts, and I use GPT quite often, also for title generation. So, for example, for this podcast episode, I tried to generate a title with ChatGPT, and usually when I say, okay, we need to generate a title for a podcast episode, it often comes up with titles like an AI journey with Sandra Kublik, for example, right? So it tries to include the name. And for people who don't know you, it might not be clear, like, okay, what is it in for me there in this episode? And then it generates, 10 titles like that with the name of the guest. And what I usually do to avoid that is in the prompt, I say, do not include the name of the guest in the title, right? But sometimes, in spite of that, it still includes the name of the guest. Even if I say do not do this, it still does that. And I had a discussion about that recently. And one of the suggestions there was that language models, large language models, in particular GPT, they have problems understanding the negation. Like when you tell it not to do something, it does not always understand that. So instead, you should tell it what to do instead of what not to do. I don't remember how exactly to fix that prompt. Like maybe show, instead of do not include the name of the guest, tell it we want I don't know, that the audience to understand how it will benefit them. So include the reasoning behind not including this. I still have to try this and see how well it works. But yeah, I'm wondering if you have any other prompt tips on creating good prompts. Perhaps you already experimented quite a lot with that and have a set of tips that you usually use for creating excellent prompts.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends so much on the model you're using, because the prompts are not necessarily translating very easily to other models. If you're optimizing for, coherence command, it will not perform in the same way with Anthropic's Claude. But the key and the answer that is always there is iteration. You just need to try it a bunch of times, see how it performs, see which version you believe will work better, maybe test it against, maybe A/B test it with users, because who knows, like maybe the title that you think will be great will not be that great. And maybe like there will be another one that will get more likes or like bigger reach, and that way the podcast will get to more people. So what's really useful always is giving model few examples. So text generation models currently are extremely savvy when it comes to what is called zero shot generation. So they're able to, without any kind of example, actually go and execute a certain task, but it's still very helpful to show it more precisely what kind of outcome you're expecting. So in the case of the podcast title, maybe grab a bunch of titles, podcast titles, book titles, whatever, blog titles that you like, and give it as an inspiration. Say, try to follow, try to make it similar or as good as those. So I definitely agree with you that saying don't do something doesn't necessarily end up being a successful command. And I kind of like it because, it's good that models are rebellious. They need to be able to do their own thing. No, but it's really useful to be very clear about the type of outcome that you want. If you know that you like a certain style, that you find something excellent, tell it to a model. It will learn from there. If you wanted to use certain keywords, tell it that. If you wanted to optimize for SEO, tell it that, and it will do it. Yeah. So the communication of your intent is very important, and being able to be empathetic enough to share as much information as possible is very important.
Empathetic to the model.
Yes, to the model and to what it can do, because imagine that you're talking to your friend and you're asking it about something. So okay, your friend can come up with a title for the podcast that will not include the name, but will you like it? Maybe not. Maybe yes. It will be like a random, very subjective generation that you might not enjoy, you might enjoy. But if you tell your friends about the type of effect you want to achieve, like if you want the title to be catchy, if you want the title to be controversial, if you want the title to be very quickly attention grabbing, because that's what we need in social media these days to get out there, then they will be able to navigate the situation better, right? Yeah. So it's the same with models, and it's all about just like trying to empathize with it and trying to communicate as well as possible to get the communication back, that hits the spot that you were trying to achieve.
And when you mentioned that we need to make a few iterations, I kind of started thinking about like my iterations of the prompt for this particular use case of coming up with a title. So at first I thought, okay, like I don't want to include names, and you still include. So then I thought, what if I am polite and I add please? Will it help? It did not. Then I thought, let me try in all caps. Like, do not include speaker name, guest name, like in all caps, like as if I was shouting at it. It did not help too. So, like, unless you know that this is a thing you need to try, like instead of, like you need to give examples. Like I would not necessarily come up myself with this tip, like in that moment. So sometimes, it just needs practice.
Examples, but also context. So give it as much context as possible. Maybe show it the outline of the questions you're trying to ask for this podcast. maybe show the description the blurb that you've created for like internally for the team or for social media before. And based off of that, let it come up with something. I usually just give as much context as possible, as much as the context window allows me, basically just like throwing in everything and giving it as much information, because usually that's what works the best.
So usually it's smart enough to figure out what is important in this pile of information.
Yes, and if it's not, then you give it instructions, like you say that wasn't great, try another way and make it shorter, longer, sound nicer, sound more polite, sound more chilled out. I don't know, like whatever you need, right? Like you can iterate based off of what you already get. But yeah, just like examples of the ideal outcome and as much context as possible.
So we already talked about one of your videos where you made a video about GPT without having access to GPT. That was a very interesting story. And I have also heard that you have another video, YouTube video, about where you integrated LLMs into your life for 7 days. Can you tell us more about that? So what was the experiment about?
Yes, of course. So I'm always extremely embarrassed when I talk about why I started doing something that I did. But long story short, I am in the LLM space for 3 years now. And so I think it's only decent that I use a certain amount of large language model based tools. And I don't do that. Like I am either too lazy to try something out, too impatient to tweak it and improve it so that it works for my particular setup, or I don't know, too attached to my existing process and to my own writing. So I decided to just challenge that and force myself to use different types of LLM-based applications and also image-based applications to see whether they will help me or not. It was surprisingly difficult to stay consistent. Like I felt like almost, it comes back to what we discussed before, that unless a person, in this case me, have a very good reason to change something because it's painful currently and you want it to be smoother, you don't do that. Like you use tools for pragmatic purposes. You just want the effect, you want to get there as fast as possible. You don't care about proving a point. So I was kind of trying to prove a point, but also trying to see whether it will, relieve the pain of certain aspects of my work. And I ended up staying with a bunch of them. So for example, I tried this email assistant, or actually just like generally, I would say digital communication assistant from Hyperwrite. And I am still using it to help me generate my emails or generate a draft that I then improve. And I'm also using it for creating my social media posts, for example. I did a bunch of experiments when it comes to creating a YouTube video itself. So for example, asking a model to come up with an outline for a video, then come up with a title. You went through this process yourself. It can be painful and you're not necessarily happy with the outcomes. Then coming up with a thumbnail for a video, then coming up with a social media post about the video. There's so much content that you can now generate with the help of the language model, but not necessarily it will satisfy you. It will satisfy the results that it will hit the results that you're looking for. And so a bunch of things I did were just like, I would never replace it that way. But then there was just one application that stuck with me. So one application that stuck with me, and the other, well, I use ChatGPT in that example. Now I'm not using ChatGPT. I use Coral from Cohere, but I kind of use it daily as well for different types of things. So it was useful. It was useful to force myself to experiment with this, and gave me some food for thought when it comes to, you know, how much of my process I want to automate, how much of that ends up being fun for me, or ends up being just annoying for me because I feel like a teacher that has to go over this outline that is very subpar to what I'm looking for, and teach the model, no, this is not how we're going to do it. We're going to do it the other way. Yes, these are the types of things that do not give me joy. I like to create, so I don't like to automate everything. But for social media, oh man, so helpful. Or emails, so helpful. I hate writing emails. Like the things that annoy you the most, that's the best things to apply the language models to. I see the highest chance of adoption there, definitely.
Are there tools that integrate into Gmail and help write emails?
Yeah, Hyperwrite is one of them. It's an extension, it's a Google Chrome extension that once you turn it on, you know, whenever you open your Gmail account and you start writing a draft, it's going to give you an example email response, or example initial email, or, you know, like whatever you need, basically, based off of your existing communication or the theme you give it to, keyword that you give it to.
Maybe I should try one, because like I need to answer quite a few emails, and sometimes I am procrastinating and end up at the end of the week with like 50 emails I need to answer, and then like, oh, it's Sunday, I need to answer these emails. So I sit and answer them and spend a lot of time.
Yeah, and also sometimes it's like when you write an email, you need to think through the particular task you're trying to solve and like ask somebody for something. But sometimes you've done this process already. So writing an email is only just like reiterating, putting it in other words. And for me, it's frustrating because the fun part, the thinking part, is done already. But I can take this thinking part, give it to the model, and then it will create an email for me. That's a time saver.
Yeah, I just realized that we actually should be wrapping up, and there are so many questions I wanted to ask you, but did not have a chance to. Because like one of the things, you have a very interesting profile, like career. You did not mention, but you have a degree in liberal arts. But then you ended up doing being in AI and doing LLMs. But maybe this is something we can talk about in the future. But for now, we should be wrapping up. Maybe last thing I want to ask you before we finish is, I know you have a book, but this book is probably like, it's 2 years old, right? So maybe some things are a bit outdated. Is there any other resource you would recommend for people who want to learn more about LLMs? Maybe something from Cohere, right?
Yes, absolutely. We have recently launched something called LLM University, which is basically a free course for folks that are trying to understand large language model foundations both from the theory side of things, but also from the pragmatic side of things of building stuff with it. So you have 2 components there, and it's a very nice primer for whatever you're going to do with LLMs in the future. Definitely recommend that. My colleague from Cohere, Jay Almer, is working on a new handbook for large language models. So follow that process. We also have a bunch of YouTube videos that are great. Our blog is also excellent when it comes to diving deeper into notions like embeddings or semantic similarity, or like how to build a chatbot, how to connect to vector database, like what kind of frameworks are hot out there. Really recommend our blog to get more tuned into LLMs right now. Yeah.
Please send us a link and then we will include this link in the description, and maybe some, like, you can, if you have time, maybe you can pick a few interesting articles that you like the most, and we can also include a link in the description. Okay, with that, we should be wrapping. Yeah, I think my connection is not stable. But yeah, unfortunately, I was not able to. I don't know if there are questions that somebody from you asked from the audience, because the moment I try to open YouTube, my internet connection freezes. So I was not able to check if there are any questions. Sorry about that.
I'll try to answer them. Like, if I can go there and answer questions, I can check that.
Or maybe if somebody wants to ask you a question, should they write you through LinkedIn, or there's any other way you prefer to be connected?
I have my YouTube channel, so please drop a comment there.
Right.
Please drop a comment on Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever. I'm everywhere. So
it's X now, right? Not Twitter.
Sorry? Oh yes,
it's X now.
Yes, X. So confusing. I am not following anymore. Things are changing so fast.
Exactly. Okay, yeah, thanks Sandra for joining us today, and thanks everyone for joining us today too. And yeah, I don't know, the next episode will probably not, it will not be about LLMs, but let's see. Maybe it actually will be.
I hope there will be more episodes anyway, maybe not the next one, but in the future. But it was really, really fun to talk to you. Thanks for having me, and have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, and week.